All right. Hello. Hi and welcome. My name is Juan Ron. I will be presenting today on two different strategies for English language learners. One of them being strategy number 11 and the other one being strategy number 15. We will go over both of them in class. I will explain what each of them are. I will go over some examples. And then at the end of each stage, I'll also have a small activity for you guys to practice it here in the classroom, all right? All right, now we're ready to move on. Let's start. So strategy number 11. So strategy number 11 is closed reading, all right? So what is the definition of closed reading? The definition is closed reading is a structured, purposeful reading of a short, complex text to uncover layers of meaning. Okay, now what does this mean? This means that closed reading is basically reading a complex text that you can reread over multiple times at the very least, and then each time get something new out of it. Have a deeper understanding of it, either of the text themselves or what the author tried to express in said text, if it has, different layers to it. Now, what is the goal? The goal of it is to help all students, ELLs, struggling readers, and even advanced people who already have a good understanding of the language, to develop a deep comprehension of said text. And we have a better understanding on how language is being used in that specific text, be it a specific word that's very complicated, or just a conjunction of words that you wouldn't normally see. It's basically learning while reading, and I think it's very helpful because once you read something more than once, you get a deeper understanding of it. Because the first time, you just get the key ideas, the main general course. The second time, you start thinking more about it. You already know the basics. So it's like, all right, what else can I get out of this reading, right? Now, what are the steps for this strategy? So, model closed reading, meaning that you want to have someone like me, reading something with you, modeling. All right, how do you do closed reading? How would you model closed reading? Basically, reading something over and over again. For example, let's say I was reading Hamlet or Shakespeare, reading a specific subject multiple times and me, showing you how to do it. Selecting short sample complex text, like I said, reading something like Hamlet, Shakespeare, or even a small article that's really scientific, anything that you wouldn't see normally in every day. Anything that is, educational for some people, or really just a complex text, because that will help you have a deeper understanding of what a language is, if it's professional. Prepare guiding questions. Now, these are questions that are supposed to make the person look at something more specific. If I were reading Romeo and Juliet, a guiding question would be me asking you, all right, let's say we're at the part of the story where Romeo finds Juliet. A guiding question would be me asking, all right, in the text, guys, if I were to ask all right, what do you think Romeo is gonna see when he sees Juliet? And this will get the students to think, all right, let me go to the story and read further to see or to read what happens when he does meet Juliet and that ending. All right. And next thing is encourage reading. So promoting reading, giving your students motivation to read, being like, all right, we're gonna read this context. It should be pretty fun because it has a really good ending. It's pretty fun, or you'll learn a lot from it. Be positive about how this can help the students in general. And then lastly, gradually increase challenge. To be able to learn something, you don't just start at the highest level. You have to start at the beginning. Basically, start with something very simple. Let's say kids' books, They're meant to be simple, short, and fun. These are a very good place to start because you can read them, you can read a lot of them, get through a lot of material, and they're very easy to understand, The meaning is very straightforward most of the times, and the plot is very simple. Then you can move on to a little bit longer stories, short stories, poems even, but keeping it simple, you know, you don't want to go to any Greek or Roman poems yet, so just keep it simple. And then as you go on, keep increasing the difficulty, you know, find a longer text, more complicated text, you know, add some Romeo and Juliet in the between, and maybe towards the end, once you feel confident enough, maybe read some Shakespeare, which is considered some of the most harder texts to understand because of the time in which it was written and, you know, very complex. And yes, those are the different steps on how to use the strategy properly. Some examples, as I mentioned before, Romeo and Juliet, because I mentioned this a lot because it's a very common book or poem that you guys will, story that you guys will read in, you know, high school or even later in your lives. Comparing author's language to summaries. So now, what this means is, look at what the author wrote and then try to understand the meaning behind them. Like when he says, Romeo, reading a line from any book, try to understand what the author tried to convey by a certain line. And then lastly, discuss figurative language foreshadowing and author's choices. So this means, look at, start thinking ahead. When you read something, you know, start trying to, in your mind, picture or imagine what's eventually gonna happen because of something that's happening, right? Like, try to finish a sentence or try to imagine how it's gonna end. And then, you know, keep doing this over and over and eventually it's gonna be better. All right, some comprehension questions. How does close reading help students go beyond surface understanding? So some questions that might help you, you know, understand this topic better. How does this help students go beyond surface understanding? This is very simple. It helps them because this promotes them reading multiple times, and after a few times, you know, you start getting the idea of, all right, let me get more out of this by reading it one more time. Short texts are recommended because for this because one, they're very easy, they're very short. You can get through it very quickly. You can reread it multiple times. Compared to longer texts, you're gonna take a lot longer. So these are better because it's a time saver and very easy to digest. What's the difference between traditional comprehension and questions and closed reading questions? I'm gonna skip that. For example, what did the character do versus an example of a question for what's the traditional comprehension and closed reading questions is what did the character do versus how did the author's choice of words shape your understanding? This would be reading a sentence, looking at it face value, and then thinking, all right, how would the author changing that sentence to something very similar change what it meant to you? An example would be, oh, Romeo fought the villain. If that were to change, we change to, there was a conflict between Romeo and the main villain. You know, how would that affect the story at all? That's the kind of question that, you know, differentiates the two. All right, now we're gonna get into our activity. So for our activity, it's gonna be very simple. I'm gonna have a passage. I'm gonna give you a minute to read it, and then you can reread it multiple times, and then you can highlight something, you know, highlight sentences or keywords that you think are very, you know, hard to understand. And then with your partners, read it together, and then discuss for a minute on what you guys struggle with and how reading it helped you understand it better. All right. The passage is from a very new, not you discovered. All right. So we're gonna read this passage, and again, with your partners, discuss how rereading it helped you understand certain parts of it better. All right. I'm gonna give you a minute, starting now. All right, so after reading the passage, you know, multiple times and discussing with your partners, was there anything in it that you guys struggled with? Any sentences that you thought were different or confusing, but after reading it multiple times, you guys understood it finally?
So, I think this theory is a very advanced mathematical theory that that's not really presented in many classes that I am in, because my level of understanding of this theory is very low, but this rereading the passage helped me understand a little bit more about the knot theory.
All right, thank you for sharing your insights on that. All right, so here we can see that by reading it, she has a better understanding of the subject, even if it was very short and not really in-depth. Even reading a short passage can help you understand something at a larger picture. All right, now we're gonna move on to our next strategy. Strategy number 15, leveled questions. I know, what are leveled questions? Leveled questioning is when teachers adapt questions to match students' English proficiency stage. Now, this means that the teacher will change the type of questions she's asking to a student based on their level of English. You know, if it was someone who's very proficient in English, she would ask highly advanced questions, you know, very lengthy questions, while asking a student who's not very proficient, who's new to the language, you know, asking more simple questions that have simpler answers, shorter answers, in which they can answer in multiple ways, not just in a voicing their answers. What is the goal of level questioning? Is to ensure all learners can respond successfully, build confidence, and expand academic language. So this is meant to help students be able to, over time, build up to better their answering capabilities, as well as understanding questions when prompted at higher levels of English or any language. Now, what are the steps for this strategy? Observe and document, meaning you're gonna first have an experience with a student. You're gonna document at what level they can understand certain questions or their language level, and then base it off on that. Use visual gestures to support. So this means that you can use your hands, pictures, and just use that to help you convey your question across. So for me, if I was, a short example is that if I was asking, all right, class, this is the type, all right, what is presented on the whiteboard right now, you know? And I can point to it, have them visually see that I'm pointing it to his whiteboard. That way it helps them recognize, all right, he's asking something about this. And then they can formulate their answer based on that. So using visual gestures, or if I had a picture of something, be able to convey that. Plan a hierarchy of questions. This means have different levels of questions at different levels. Have introductory level questions at the very base, you know, the simplest way you can question something, and then build up from there to harder and harder questions over time. Scaffold responses. So scaffolding responses is being able to have an answer that can be built upon to become better over time. An example would be an answer to the question, what is a horse? All right, a horse is an animal. That's a very basic, you know, the base of it. A horse is an animal. All right, how you can build from there. All right, a horse is an animal that has 4 legs, is very tall and strong. All right, what do you get from there? A horse is a mammal that is a land-type mammal, and is one of the faster land mammals on Earth. And you can build from there, you know? Have a base in which you can build off the same answer and make it more complicated or more complex. Assess progress. While asking questions, keep in mind what their answers, the type of answers you're getting, and see, all right, is this student improving over time with the questions as they're getting more and more complex, or are they stagnant at the same level? Are they progressing at all in their level of their answers? And then lastly, reflect. All right, were the questions you were asking good? Were they at the correct level for this specific student? Were they too hard? Were they too easy? Adapt your questions as you're going, and then reflect on what the student is giving you back to you. All right? Examples. So these are examples of the 4 levels of questions: pre-production, early production, speech emergence, and intermediate fluency. Now, a pre-production question on let's say the topic was Cuba, right? A pre-production question would be, point to Cuba on a map, right? Very simple. It doesn't require an answer, a voiced answer. They can very simply use their hands and point at a map. You know, it can be non-verbal. Early production, what ocean is Cuba in? Again, this is a question, it's a higher, because now they can use a visual representation where they can point at a map and point at a globe, oh, here it is, and point to the ocean. Or they can also just answer the question by saying, oh, Cuba is in the Pacific. I believe that that's right. Now, speech emergence, how far is Cuba from the US? Now, this requires a totally voiced answer. So now they have to say a number, now they have to speak up. They can no longer have a visual answer. Now they have to use their words at the very least. I don't know how far it is, but I'm assuming it's at least a few hundred kilometers, a few thousand kilometers from here. And then intermediate fluency. Why was Kennedy considered about missiles into Cuba? Now this is a question that implies at least a full sentence as an answer. So, or multiple sentences overall. So, example would be, Kennedy was concerned about the missiles in Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis because blank, 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 and you can continue off of there using full sentence, showing that the student is being able to be fluently in said language. Comprehension questions. So now, why is it important to adapt to questions? That's very simple. Adapting to questions is very helpful because not only is it helpful for you because you will get answers that are better answers for your questions, and the student gets a lot of benefit of this because they're able to answer questions at their level, or be able to answer questions that they are confident they can answer in, or it just helps them be able to understand you at the very least. How do visuals and scaffolds help students feel successful? Visuals help because they're able to provide a different type of answer for the students. They can have a visual, which is better for them if they are nonverbal. And scaffolding just helps to be able to build answers. What might happen if a teacher only uses an advanced level? What might happen if a teacher doesn't adapt to the student's level is that the student might not be able to answer any questions at all. They might feel very pressured. They might feel uncomfortable. So it's just very beneficial if she starts with very basic, questions. All right, moving on. Now we have our last activity for the day. So right now, I will split the classroom into 4, and you guys will, each group will make a question about the topic of rowing, the sport, right? Well, one group will have a pre-construction, one group will have early construction, another will have speech emergence, and the other group will have a fluent question. All right, now break off, and we'll come back in 10 seconds. All right, so what question did you come up here in the pre-construction phase?
What is an oar?
Okay, so pre-construction. So in this scenario, they said, what is an oar? I'm assuming that they also would provide pictures of said equipment from rowing, and the student would be able to just point at said picture. All right. All right. Lastly, conclusion. All right. Closing off. Close reading builds deep comprehension through structured meaning and analysis. Level questions. Level questions builds confidence and participation by tailoring questions to English proficiency. And then both strategies reduce anxiety, promote engagement and inclusivity, strengthen academic language across grade levels. And that is it.